Or for questions.
Absolutely. So hi, my name is Rhema Boyo. I currently work as a senior software engineer at Slack. Prior to that, I was working at a startup called Persado. And what Persado does is basically we would help brands kind of improve their marketing and user engagement using machine learning. And so that I was working at that startup there for 5 years. And that was my first job after I graduated from App Academy in 2017. I graduated from App Academy in August of 2017. And prior to that, I was not working in tech at all. I was doing a couple different things. So I have a bachelor's degree in political science from a state college here in New Jersey. Right now I live in Brooklyn, but I graduated from Montclair State University in 2014 with a degree in political science. I moved over to DC, worked in some nonprofits there for about a year. And then after that, I worked in the private sector doing mortgage banking for a couple years before I transitioned into wanting to be an engineer. So that's a little bit about my background. I guess we can get into that a little bit more. But yeah, right now at Slack, I work as a backend engineer. Prior to that, I was working as a full stack developer, React on the front end, Ruby on Rails on the back end. And right now at Slack, our backend is in a language called Hacklang, which is not very well known. It's pretty much only used by Slack and Facebook. But yeah, that's what I'm working in. And there's a bunch of other technologies we work with on the backend as well, but that's kind of a broad idea.
Great. Thanks so much, Rima. Okay, we've already got some questions coming in. Thanks, Ricky. Ricky asks, could you tell me more about your experience in the marketing role? How you got in the door, what you did. I heard that machine learning requires either lots of hands-on experience or even a master's degree.
Yeah, so at that company, that's an important thing to realize is that a lot of jobs or companies that are like AI based, there's different departments. So as an engineer, you're mostly going to be working on the software, and then there will be a team mostly with data science backgrounds. At my company, there are a lot of PhDs in natural language processing, PhDs in machine learning, PhDs in data science and mathematics and statistics, who were actually working on the actual machine learning models and the kind of like heavy language modeling, whereas the engineers at the company, what we were working on is kind of like integrating. So basically, there would be a data science team and an ML team, and they would write out kind of an R package. So R is a math-based programming language that is used heavily in data science. So they would write out an R package, and then our job as the engineers would be to integrate their machine learning models, the statistical models in R, maybe some of the models that they have in Python, take those models and integrate them with the actual application that we're working on. So at that company there, my job was basically there's a front end layer where users are kind of like interacting and like building their campaigns, their marketing campaigns. And then on the back end, what we're doing is you have the layer where users are integrating with the marketing campaigns. You have the data layer where all the business logic is kept. And then we're integrating with machine learning models on the back end. So what the software engineers are doing is the overall integration between the data science, the machine learning, the front end, the user experience, everything like that.
Great, thank you. It looks like Ricky has a follow-up question. Does that mean you needed to be experienced in interpreting the data-related information they gave you?
Yeah, so a lot of anything that had to do with like serious math, you don't have to be experienced in because yeah, on the machine learning side, on the data science side, they're doing heavy statistics that's above the level of your basic software engineer. And so a lot of the heavy mathematical modeling they're dealing with, and what you have to be cognizant of is kind of how you're integrating with the data. So you have to be able to understand the data, understand how we're querying the data, understand how we're aggregating the information. So you don't need to know the nitty-gritty mathematic concepts, but you need to have a really strong understanding of the data, how it's being queried, how it's being aggregated, how it's being presented to the user, and what information we're trying to get. So there is a little bit, like if you're working at a company that is heavily AI based, or you're working with a lot of ML engineers and data scientists, there's math involved, but on the engineering side, you're more dealing with data points and presentation and aggregation than like the actual statistics.
Great, thank you. Faith, you've got your hand up.
All right. Hello. So my question is related. So in a coding boot camp, a lot of it is, first of all, you're trying to learn a lot. And you're also learning it more independently, at least in my boot camp, you build your own projects. So my question is, when it comes to like collaborative coding or peer coding, because when you get into like a real job, you're going to be coding with other people. So as I seek out those collaborative projects, what are some key things to make sure that I'm doing so that I'll be able to transition well into coding in a team? Because my main question is like, I can ask someone, hey, do you want to work on a project? Right. And then we can start building it. But what are some like intentional things to make sure I'm starting to do now with my collaborative coding so that when I get on like a bigger team or even like a same size team, I know how to make that transition?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really good question. It's an extremely important point, because when I started my first job as a full-time engineer, the hardest thing to adjust to was, oh, I'm joining this code base. There's millions of lines of code, and I've been asked to fix a bug. And what am I supposed to do now? I think the only way to mirror that experience would be to contribute to an open source project where this it's the exact same scenario. You have this huge code base where a bunch of people are making changes, and you have this one thing that you're being asked to do. So there are a lot of open source projects out there, and usually really good ones will have lists of tickets, and they'll have lists of like starter tickets for newer or less experienced engineers to get started with. So I would recommend contributing to open source to get the feel of what it would be like to be at a company. The other thing that you asked is, what are the most important things to do when you are collaborating? Using Git, getting really comfortable with Git.
Okay.
Getting really comfortable kind of like providing updates with the people that you're working with. So if you're in a Discord or Slack channel or whatever, like however you guys are collaborating, just making sure you're giving people updates, saying, hey, here's where I am, and getting used to like asking questions. You can also do this in Git. If all the workflow is happening in Git, you can kind of in your PR leave comments, leave questions. And one thing that you can get good at that will actually help you on the job in your first job will be writing out. So if you are working in open source, or you're just working in a collaboration on GitHub, writing out a good PR, right? Like, here are the changes that I made. Here are here's why I made those changes. Here's my reasoning, and going through the diffs in your GitHub repo and leaving comments of, this is what this change is for. If it's not clear, X, Y, Z. I think the whole like Git workflow and like communication and collaboration in a team, if you can start a new job as a junior engineer and have already had that experience, that would be awesome.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, we have another question in the chat from Santa. Hi, can you share with us your experience of landing your first job as a software engineer after graduating from your coding bootcamp? How long did it take you to be ready for tech interviews, and do you have any tips?
Yeah, so at App Academy, and I know things have changed at App Academy now, but when I went in 2017, we had a 12-week boot camp. And I believe, if I remember correctly, in those last 4 weeks, we kind of like built out a full stack project, and then started working on algorithms and data structures. So I would say that after we kind of got into the algorithms and data structures part of the program, I was just working on that pretty regularly, just going on LeetCode, and then every day just doing, a few LeetCode problems every day. But you also need to like keep keep all of your non-leak code skills fresh. So you want to make sure that if you finish the bootcamp and you have your project that you're done with, your full stack project or your front end project or your back end project, that you're continuing to make tweaks, like all the little nice to haves that you wanted, but you weren't actually able to do in the 12 weeks of your program or however long until you had to present your project. Continue to work on those, continue to push those changes, continue to flesh it out so that in your resume, if you have your projects in your resume for the different companies that you're applying to, the recruiters, if they do click on your project link, you really just want to make sure that it looks nice. That's really all that they're going to do, is like they want to open the link, they want to see that it opens, they want to see that it looks reasonable and nice, and they can do a few different things and then move on. One of the things that helped me land my first job was when I was done with App Academy, I had my full stack project up, and the hiring manager, he would go through everyone's project links on their resume and make sure that, like, so at App Academy, basically, you're taught your project needs to be able to create something, update something, read something from the database, and delete something from the database. So what this hiring manager would do, he would go on your website that you had on your resume for your project, make sure you can create something, make sure deleting works, make sure you can edit, like all the basic functionalities that any application should be able to do. He would just go through it. Yeah, exactly. Go through the CRUD. And if you fail any aspect of the CRUD, he's not going to reach out. And so first, just making sure the UI is great. Also, if it's ugly, he wasn't going to reach out either. So that's super important. Make sure the UI is great if you're a full stack or front-end engineer. And then make sure that all of your CRUD operations work as expected. Yeah, so that is really important to just getting your first interview, is making sure that your actual project, your resume and all of that looks great and actually works. And then once you're on the interview, the most important thing to know is, what does this company do? And what are the kinds of companies that they're likely to ask? So with the company that I was interviewing with, I knew that they were a data company. And so one of the biggest weaknesses of App Academy is probably the SQL aspect of App Academy. It's just not, we do it for like 3 days or whatever. So I knew that, okay, I'm interviewing a company that's heavily data-based. I need to be better at SQL. And so I prepared for SQL, and I did get SQL questions in the interview. So make sure that you're not just doing generic leak coding and thinking that you're going to be able to be prepared for all of your interviews. Think about the kind of company that it is, what kind of things that they work on, and then ask around. Ask people who started there, or go on different online forums and see what the interview process is like and see how practical it is. At Slack, for example, we don't ask any leak coding questions. So if you just did leak code and then came to do an interview at Slack, you probably wouldn't be well prepared, because we don't do any leak code questions. So yeah, I would say those are some points.
Thank you. Next question is from Zin. Hi, how long does it take you to get to the next level from junior to senior? Is there anything that you had done to stand out at your workplace to show that you were ready to be in the senior position?
Yeah, so on average, let me see here. Let's see. But yeah, so most companies, they have kind of different levels. So you can start off as a junior engineer, then a mid-level engineer, then a senior engineer. Some companies might have like an associate engineer, then an engineer 1, and then an engineer 2, and then a senior engineer. But for the most part, it takes around 2 years to go from junior to mid-level, 1 to 2 years to go from junior to mid-level, and then 5 to 7 years to go into being a senior. And the scopes of so when you're thinking about the levels, you want to think about scope of responsibilities. So basically, when you're a junior engineer, well, let's start even at the more foundational level. Let's say you're an intern, or you just started your first job in tech. If you're an intern, for example, the engineers on the company are going to give you work that they already know exactly how to complete. So by the time they're giving you the thing that they want you to change, the bug they want you to fix, the feature they want you to build, they've already like planned out the whole thing. They know exactly what needs to be done. So they're just giving you a project that's already like pre-made, right? They kind of tell you, here are all the steps, just go through and do all the steps, right? When you're after kind of you're an intern and you've met like kind of basic expectations as a junior engineer, you're given a feature and or bugs, and it's kind of like it's well defined and well understood, but it's up to you to implement it, right? So your responsibility as a level 1 engineer is you're given features, you're given bugs, and then your job is just to build it out and get it done. Then to go from a junior engineer to a mid-level engineer, the expectation is that you have a better understanding of the overall project, what the goals are, understanding of the product, and the product manager or your senior engineer or your team lead or your tech lead or whatever, they're going to expect that they can give you unscoped projects where, hey, we're thinking of doing this, we're thinking of doing X, Y, and Z, and they would expect you as a mid-level engineer to be able to say, okay, here are some of the technical requirements that would come from that. Here are the challenges that I could foresee. Here's how long I think this would take. And here's all the different steps that we'd have to do to be able to get this project done, right? So on the mid-level engineer, your scope of responsibility is on the level of the project. So there's an entire project and you need to be able to think about it in depth and think about the technical requirements and think about the edge cases and all the things that could come up from there. So junior engineer, you're solving problems at the level of features and bugs. Mid-level engineer, you're solving problems at the level of projects. Then to reach the senior engineer level, you're solving problems at the team level. So basically, you're mentoring others. So the leadership is a really big part of being a senior engineer, where you're mentoring others, you're collaborating with people on other teams. So it's not just about the different like a specific project that you're working on. There's like many different projects and collaborations with people on other teams. And then there are people on your team that need your help. And so people might message you and say, hey, can you help me out with this? And you hop on a call with them for an hour and kind of like debug and pair program and all these kinds of things. So as a senior engineer, you have a leadership responsibilities, you have cross-team collaboration responsibilities, and you're also kind of thinking about like longer term vision for a product.
Thanks, Rima. Next question is from Christina. How do you go about learning new technologies that you didn't learn while at your boot camp?
Yeah, so I think for me, there's a couple things that are important. Is like, what are the technologies that'll help me level up within the company that I'm at? So what is the tech stack of the company that I'm in? And what do I need to learn to be able to improve within the company that I'm working at? And so it's nice if you're able to be paid while you learn. Ideally, you'd be able to be paid while you learn. And so what you want to do to be able to accomplish that is to talk with your manager. Like when you get your first job, you want to talk with your manager and say, hey, these are the skills that I want to learn, and I would like to be put on projects that would help me gain reps at those skills. Because just reading blogs and watching tutorials and all these kinds of things are helpful to get an idea of what a technology is, but it isn't until you're actually building things that you actually are able to gain competency in certain skills. So if you're working at a company, you want to think about, okay, what do I want to learn for my career growth within this company? What do I want to learn for my career growth outside this company? And then talk with your manager about like, hey, these are the kinds of projects that I want to do. And I'd like to be able to like learn these skills as I do them. So you want to have that in the forefront of your mind. And then if you don't have that opportunity, if you're not working at a company, or if your manager is telling you, hey, we just don't have these opportunities available right now, then, outside of your work, you want to think about side projects that you can work on, open source projects that you can work on that use the technologies that you're interested in, and other people you can collaborate with and learn with. But you want to actually be building things and working on things rather than just like watching tutorials, so that you're actually gaining competency in the skill.
Next question is from Girma, hope I'm saying that right. What was the most challenging aspect of your App Academy journey that you believe ultimately helped you secure a job in the tech industry?
I mean, the most challenging aspect of App Academy when I went was just like how much time I was putting in there. So back when I went, it was full time, and it was basically like more than 12 hours a day of just like studying and like working on projects and like learning things. So it was just the intensity, and like that's not, it's good that it was only 3 months, because it's not really sustainable for a year for the amount of time and effort that we were putting into the work. But I think the most important thing that I learned there that helped me land a job and be successful was just kind of just the basic fundamentals of engineering and programming, just understanding like what are the important parts of an application, for a web application, and just the fundamentals of programming and engineering. I think I did get a good sense of like the basic fundamentals that allowed me to get my first job. And then from there, I was able to kind of like broaden out and get a better idea of things that are going on in engineering as a whole, and all sorts of like small, minute things that are important to being an engineer. But as far as like just getting the big picture and like understanding at a high level, what are the fundamentals and what are the important things to know, I think that's what I gained from Academy.
Great. Next question is from Carlos. As a bootcamp grad, when would be a good time to move up from intern, new grad geared roles to junior level roles?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends if your first role is in the technology stack that you learned in App Academy, or any bootcamp that you went to, right? So for example, when I went to App Academy, I learned Ruby on Rails, I learned React, I learned Postgres, and my first job was exactly in that technology stack. So I was actually able to just like get started without any ramp up period, because they knew that I knew those technologies, and they didn't have to like train me on Ruby on Rails. They didn't have to train me on React. So I was able to just like start working on features and bugs. But if you are joining a company and they're aware that you're not familiar with their tech stack, then there will be like more of an onboarding period where they're gonna give you time to kind of understand this new programming language, understand their new technology stack, and there will be like a ramp up time. I've never done an internship, but from the interns that I've worked with at Slack, for example, like I said, everything is just kind of like handed to them on a platter. We're not expecting them to come up with anything new or think about things that are too complex. We're just like, here's a project that's like super well defined. Here are all the details, and we want you to implement it. So yeah, usually in an internship, it's the projects are really well fit for someone who's like brand new and like has never built anything before.
Next question is from Jenny. When looking for your first dev role, I would love to hear how you approach job search process and applications, spray and pray versus more targeted companies.
Yeah, so I think I definitely did a spray and pray approach. I was just like applying everywhere and anywhere pretty much, because I didn't know. Yeah, like I had no background. no reason for anyone to to reach out to me or to believe that I knew what I was doing. So my approach was, okay, I'm going to apply to every company that that I can find on all the different platforms. Then secondarily, I would reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn. So if I saw a job application that was on LinkedIn, I would try to find the recruiter, shoot them a message. And then another thing that I tried to do was to look for jobs outside of my specific location. So at the time, I was living in New York City, and I was willing to move out, right? I was willing to look for jobs in New Jersey. I was willing to look for jobs all the way down to DC and Philadelphia. And like my radius for landing a job was very wide. And I did find that applying to companies that were outside of New York, I did hear back faster because they had less applicants. And so that was something that helped as well. Also, yeah, reaching out to people in my network. If I heard that anyone got an interview somewhere, I would apply to that company. Especially if we went to the same boot camp and someone got an interview there, then I know, okay, that place is open to hiring people from this boot camp, so I would apply there. Thinking about like other places people from your boot camp have applied to. For example, at App Academy, there are certain companies that love hiring from App Academy. There are certain companies that love hiring from Full Stack or whatever the different boot camps are now. But there are companies that hire from specific boot camps, and just making sure you're definitely applying to those. And then, yeah, just like increasing your radius of places you're willing to work at.
Yeah, just as like an on-ramp aside, we're definitely seeing that if people are willing to relocate, it can be beneficial right now, just because a lot of people are quitting because they're being asked to return to the office. So if you as a junior are willing to go into the office, then that might put you ahead of some other applicants right off the bat. Just something to think about. Next question is from Sydney. Did App Academy help you get your first position, or was it due to your own job searching network? You might have just answered that question, but if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, so App Academy does have, or any bootcamp has like a department that is built specifically to connect you with companies. But I would say that 90% of people who graduate from bootcamp will end up getting a job that they found on their own, because the direct connections will only work for some small percentage of people within the bootcamp. And it's limited, right? Like it's naturally limited to, like there are less of those direct connection positions than there are for all of the people who have graduated. So I definitely wouldn't rely or have the expectation at all that your bootcamp would be extremely helpful to you in landing your first job. If you're applying to a bootcamp or if you're in a bootcamp, you should have the expectation that they're going to help you get the skills that you need, and you will be joining a pre-existing network, right? So there are going to be a lot of other people in your cohort at whatever bootcamp you're in. There will be a lot of alumni from the bootcamp you're in. So you're going to have a network of people to reach out to and talk to and like help you and see what companies are hiring and all that kind of stuff. So the bootcamp is valuable for the network, for gaining the skills faster, not necessarily for like connecting you to companies.
Thank you. Let's see here. This is from Tisby. How do you know when you're ready for junior software engineering roles?
I think it depends what kind of engineer you're trying to be, right? So if you're a front end engineer and and you can build a React application pretty, pretty well, like you have a really good handle on like your basic CSS and HTML and JavaScript, and if you feel like if you go into a front end interview, you kind of like are able to answer the questions that are scoped to the framework that you understand. I think you're ready for to start applying for junior engineer positions. If you're a full stack engineer and you're able to build an application and you have something that's like a project that's hosted somewhere and you've gotten feedback on it from other people, that's another really important thing, is to get feedback from people for your project so you can continue to improve it. Yeah, you should start applying once you have a project that you feel proud of and that you've gotten feedback on. Yeah, I think you can start applying to be a junior engineer.
Next question's from Reina. Did you ever find yourself in a position where opportunities weren't given to you to help you grow? For example, projects scoped down or paused, or constantly hopping between teams? If so, how did you feel motivated, or how did you stay motivated and find ways to continue growing when things may have been outside of your control?
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to encounter setbacks, projects that are killed by the higher up staff, projects that are really, really poorly defined, and the product managers that you're working with, might not be any good at like writing up a story or an idea of what a feature is. And so there is a lot of kind of like self-motivated and self-driven work that you're going to end up doing depending on the circumstances that you find yourself in. And so, yeah, I would say that one of the things that'll really help you in your career is understanding how to communicate effectively. So let's say you're being asked to work on a feature or a project that you don't really understand, and it's not really well outlined. If you're able to kind of like follow up with people, ask questions quickly, that's a really important thing, is to ask questions and gain understanding as fast as possible. You'll be like way ahead of other people. I think as someone who was an engineering manager, one of the biggest problems that I saw with junior engineers was they wouldn't ask questions because they had some imposter syndrome, or they had some sense that they didn't want people to feel like they didn't know what they were doing. And so what usually would happen would be they would be quiet and not say anything. And then after a few days, I would follow up with them, or the product manager would follow up with them, or whoever is waiting on the work will follow up. And then at that point, they kind of say, hey, I've been struggling and I'm kind of confused here and I don't know how to do X, Y, and Z. So you need to make sure that when something is presented to you, if you have any questions or you don't understand anything, that you ask questions right away, you get clarity on things right away, you figure out who you can communicate with to unblock yourself as soon as possible. And when you are communicating, and when you're communicating with a manager, when you're communicating with a product manager, when you're communicating with your tech lead or other engineers on your team, what you want to make sure to do is package your question appropriately. So let them know, hey, here's what I understand about this problem, and here's what I've tried to look up on Google or in the docs, and here's where I'm still confused, here's what I don't understand, so that the person who you're reaching out to feels like, oh, this person's like already put in some bit of effort. They're presenting me a question with a lot of background and a lot of context. So you want to make sure you're providing people a good amount of context when you're communicating, so that they can help you get unblocked faster.
Thank you. Next question from Zin. If you can recall from day one as a junior level, did they train you before they assigned you tickets to work on, or was it more of like a dive into code from day one?
For me, it was a dive in, because the tech stack was exactly the same as App Academy. So they kind of had the expectation that I knew had some foundational knowledge already. And so, but other companies, especially large companies, so yeah, different companies have different bandwidth for onboarding. If you're joining a startup, for example, you should expect that there will be very little onboarding, or if there is onboarding, it won't be as extensive as it will be at a large company. So if you're joining a large company, you might not even do anything meaningful for 3 months, right? So I had peers at App Academy who joined, these big tech companies, or kind of, maybe they're not FANG companies, but they're just really large companies with thousands of engineers. And so their onboarding process, they would tell me, hey, it's been 3 months and I haven't done anything that important. If you're joining a startup, you're very, very likely going to be working on things that are above your level of understanding very quickly. And there usually won't be a lot of resources and documentation to learn. So I would say, coming into a startup or a smaller tech company, you should expect that there'll be a lot less handholding than if you go to a large company. And that's where being able to ask questions and gain context and communicate effectively will be super important. But if you're joining a large company, they're going to have lots of documentation, they're going to have lots of onboarding, and you will have a lot of time to ramp up.
This is kind of just a follow-up from Zin. Like, how long did it take you before you felt like you really understood the code base?
It takes a long time. So I think, in your first 3 months, you're going to be panicking. You're going to feel like you have no clue what's going on. And you're going to be in meetings and people are going to be saying things. And you're just like, I left that meeting. I don't understand most, like 95% of the words that were said in this meeting. I have no clue what anyone is talking about. And so you're just going to be walking around like super confused for the first, few weeks. But eventually things start to seep in. Eventually you're going to touch different parts of whatever product that you're working on, and you're going to start to feel like, okay, I think I understand what's going on here. I would say, yeah, about 3 months to be able to feel like you understand the terminology, you understand the technology a little bit, you kind of have some foundational understanding of the team that you're working on. And then maybe like 6 months to feel like, okay, like I can make meaningful contributions on my own, and feel a little bit more confident, like, okay, I think I got this now.
Thank you. Next question is from Kevin. I see you were a part of the Dev Color program. What did that do for your career? And are you still a member of the program if it's not too personal?
Yeah, so Dev Color, for people who don't know, is kind of it's a program for Black software engineers to meet with their peers and like mentor one another, and kind of like it's a peer mentorship program. And so I joined that program in 2020, and it's been extremely helpful for my career, just being in a group with engineers at different levels. So in my cohort, you have people with 10 years of experience, people with 1 year of experience, people who are doing different kinds of engineering. You have people who are doing iOS, people who are doing SRE, people who are doing infrastructure, people who are doing backend, people who are full stack, front end, all that kind of stuff. And you kind of get a sense, okay, like these are all the different kinds of engineers that I can be. This is how someone who's a staff engineer works. This is how someone who is a junior engineer, like what they're dealing with. You have the opportunity to mentor other people. You have the opportunity to be mentored, to find mentors. And then you have just like people to vent with, and people to help you grow your career, and people who have been through similar things and give you advice. So yeah, in the 3 to 4 years that I've been in DevColor so far, I think, it's been a valuable resource as far as just like getting support, mostly just the support in my career. Here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm struggling with. Here are my goals. How can I reach those goals? And accountability as well. So there's someone in my cohort that I meet with every Friday and kind of just say, review our goals every week. Here's what we're trying to do for the year. Here's what we're trying to do for the quarter. Here's what we're trying to do for the month. Here's what we're trying to do for the week. And it kind of just keeps me accountable in terms of like career growth.
Thank you. Next one from Girma. What was the most difficult concept for you at App Academy and how did you tackle it?
Ooh, I think I didn't understand SQL very well, and we also didn't spend that much time on it. Yeah, I think I just didn't have a sense of like what was going on with like join query. Like it wasn't very intuitive for me. I would say SQL did not come to me very intuitively. And the thing I struggled with the most was probably CSS. I think CSS is like the most deceptively hard thing to do as like a full stack engineer. Just there's just so many ways to destroy a project with bad CSS. And I was just very confused when I was like building my full stack project with making it look the way that I wanted. So yeah, I would say CSS and SQL were the two least intuitive things that I learned at App Academy, and the two things that we got the least training on. But CSS in particular is very important because you want to make sure that whatever you're presenting looks great. And so yeah, just getting an understanding of that took a little bit of time. And same with SQL, but that was just that was important for the company that I ended up working at, but it might not be super important at every company, like in terms of like getting your first job. But yeah, those two things were highlights.
Thank you. Next question is from Jessica. What is something you brought from your prior career that you're able to apply today?
That's a great question. I would say, yeah. So I worked in sales, in mortgage sales, mortgage banking for a couple of years, and I think what that allowed me to do was just to think about what people want, how to communicate effectively, and how to persuade and like get my point across and get people and like create consensus around things. So I think that's very important. Written communication is extremely important because that's how a lot of things are communicated. Like whether it's in your Slack channel or your PRs or anywhere else, emails. Just like being able to write effectively and communicate effectively and get your point across is really important. You're actually doing a lot of writing text as a programmer in your PRs, in Slack, when you have to present, like, let's say you've written a feature or you've finished a project and now you have to like do a write-up of like, here are the challenges that we did. Here's how we overcame them, X, Y, and Z. So yeah, written communication, written and spoken are the most important skills I gained before I was an engineer.
Next question is from Mickey. What was your first tell me about yourself kind of personal pitch and what's your current one? I'm assuming this is in like an interview context, that dreaded question.
Yeah. They used to make us have an elevator pitch in App Academy. And I think mine was just kind of like, because I didn't have any engineering experience, I kind of talked about what I was encouraged to do was think about the highlights of technical things that I worked on in previous jobs and kind of like highlight how I overcame challenges and my overall journey, since I didn't have like the specific technical expertise. So those are things that I highlighted, like overcoming obstacles in my career up until that point as a general kind of like overview, emphasizing what made me want to become an engineer, why that was an interest of mine. And now with someone who does have experience, now the pitch is more so about like, what are like the technical challenges that I've resolved, in the past few years? What are kind of like the leadership and impact that I've shown in previous companies and previous roles, and just like emphasizing your skills, your effectiveness, your outcomes. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question is from Shinaso. Tips for juniors working in a startup. I'm definitely doing more mid-level work, but it's only been a month.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think that's very common for smaller companies and startups, is doing work that's above your level. But I would encourage you, because you do get to grow super fast, because you are given a lot of responsibility. And so even though it does feel a little bit overwhelming, you're becoming a better engineer faster than some of your peers who might have gone to a more name brand company, because you're actually doing more difficult work earlier on. And so I would embrace that challenge and just work with your manager. I think it's really important to build a good relationship with your manager, and be able to say what your challenges are, and be able to find someone. If it's not your manager, let's say your manager has too many responsibilities and they don't have time, and you only have your one-on-one with them every couple of weeks or whatever, finding someone on your team who is, I think there are three kinds of people you want to find. One person who is at your level, who you feel very comfortable being extremely honest with and saying, hey, I have no clue what's going on. Do you know what's going on? So you want to find a peer who is at your level, who you're comfortable looking stupid with, because you guys are both in the same bucket. Then you want to find someone who is above your level, who you have a good rapport with and can help you get unblocked. And then third, you want to have a good working relationship with your manager. So I think if you have those three people on your speed dial, your speed Slack or whatever, to message, that can be like a great help in terms of like relieving the anxiety there.
Great, thank you. The next question is, this is about hiring. So I'm not sure if you have any insight into this. I'll go ahead and ask it. This is from Dolores. Do you have any tips on how to find jobs out of state that will hire new grads, or do you know of any companies we should look into? I have applied to several out of state and within my state, but find that experience is still the main obstacle. I have even looked into apprenticeships.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's really, yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult to find companies that are willing to hire someone who has limited experience. And you maybe also think about like the diversity of the different size of company that you're hiring, that you're looking at too. Like if you're reaching out to a company that has a really small staff, maybe there's someone you can message on LinkedIn and try to see if they're willing to look at your project, or willing to let you know what the interview process might be like, or find out what people might be looking for. And yeah, it's really important to see if there's anyone that you know who currently works at that company as well, and like reaching out to them. But I don't know if there's a silver bullet in terms of like finding companies that are that have these positions open and are looking for people with less experience. It's really just like trial and error, and using all the different hiring platforms as much as possible.
Thank you. We've got a bunch more messages, but just a little more time. So we'll have time for maybe one or two more questions. This is from Angie. Content about working in tech is something that's blowing up right now on social media. What are some misconceptions that are out there and what's real? Should junior software engineers focus on job hopping to increase their compensation and perks, or is it better to stick to one company and build out their career?
That is really an excellent question, because so I'll give you, I don't think either one is more, in terms of the job hopping or staying at one company, I don't think either one is more valid than the other. I'll tell you the upside of staying at a company for a long time. For me, the upside was career growth. So I stayed at my company for 5 years after I graduated at App Academy, and not just the growth in your career, but you are able to see long-term solutions to problems, long-term downsides. So there are things that I worked on in my first year, and I didn't see the downsides of that until my third year, right? There are things that I worked on, and I got to see, oh, wow, like this was a real success, like over a long period of time. And then you get to build on your understanding in the same place and work on larger and larger scope problems in the same place. If you're job hopping every year or every 2 years, you're kind of restarting. So let's say two different people. One person worked at the same company for 4 years, and the other person worked at 3 different companies for 4 years. Every time you switch companies, there's that 3-month period of like, oh, I'm like learning, and I really don't know what's going on, and I'm kind of like gaining this new context again. So if you have that 3-month period at 3 different companies, you're like 9 months behind the person who stayed at the company for 4 years, right? So not only that, but when you move from company to company, you're not gaining a lot of depth on certain skills or certain workflows or technologies, depending on like whether you're switching between different tech stacks whenever you transition. The upside of job hopping is you get paid more. So every time you get a new job, your raise is much bigger than if you stay at the same company. So usually if that person who did 3 jobs in 4 years is probably getting paid 50% more than the person who stayed at the same job for 4 years, just because of the way that things work in terms of like raises within one company. So yeah, you'll definitely get paid more if you switch jobs more rapidly, but you would have like less depth of understanding of specific technologies, and you kind of have like less work experience because you're kind of like getting ramped up every time you switch a new position. One other upside of switching companies is you do get more of a breadth of experience. So you haven't just worked in the same industry with the same size of company with the same tech stack for 4 years, right? So if you worked at these 3 different companies, you kind of have an understanding like, oh, this is how different teams do this. This is what this other tech stack is like. This is what these different sizes of companies are like. So yeah, there's different upsides and downsides for each.
Thank you so much. To be respectful of time, that is going to be the last question we can answer, but I know that we got to most of them. I want to say thank you to everyone for your time and questions today, and to Rhema for sharing so much of your experience and insights with us. I just wanted to see if there's any last piece of advice that you'd like to offer, anything you'd like to close out the session with before we sign off.
Well, let me see here. Let me see if I got to some of the most important points. But yeah, thank you for having me. I wish you guys a lot of luck in terms of like your career and your job search. If you're on the job search right now, your career growth. If you already have a job, and yeah, I think some of the points I'll just leave you with is, make sure if you're a junior engineer that you're asking questions and getting unblocked as soon as possible. Don't let the imposter syndrome hold you back from communicating with your manager, communicating with your peers. Build that good relationship with your manager. Leverage that relationship with other people on your team, and As far as everything else, as far as like the job search and everything, if you can contribute to open source and like find a good project that will help you gain those collaborative skills and those get skills, look for that. And then yeah, I think those are some of the core points.
Great. Thank you so much, Rhema. I'll send you a follow-up message tomorrow just to say thank you. Thank you again to everyone for participating. You can find a recording of this inside the Onramp dashboard sometime early next week. And we hope to see you at the next one. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.